asking about Olivia Sullivan's family, sticking to topics like her grades and how her own son was doing in school. Olivia Sullivan took the opportunity to ask Margaret Thompson about amusing stories from Michael Thompson's past. When it came to that topic, Margaret Thompson perked right up. She had plenty to share, and every few sentences had Olivia Sullivan covering her mouth, laughing uncontrollably. The two of them chatted away like mother and daughter, leaving Michael Thompson feeling a bit left out. But Emily Thompson, who was feeding her little sister, leaned over. "Michael, you sure are bold, bringing a girl home already? Aunt Maggie doesn't want you dating too young, you know." "What are you talking about?" Michael Thompson said righteously. "We're just classmates." "Then why don't you bring other classmates home for dinner?" "You don't understand. Olivia's had it tough." Michael Thompson repeated the same story he'd used to fool his mom. But Emily Thompson pursed her lips, clearly not believing a word of it. She had personally seen Olivia Sullivan drop Michael Thompson off at home. The car she was driving that night wasn't something an ordinary family could afford. Michael Thompson didn't care whether she believed him or not. As long as his mom bought it, that was all that mattered. Just then, the younger cousin suddenly wriggled out of Emily Thompson's arms, toddled past Michael Thompson, ran over to Olivia Sullivan, and threw her arms around Olivia's legs with a plop. Olivia Sullivan jumped, startled. Turning her head, she saw an adorable doll-like little girl hugging her legs. The younger cousin patted her leg, and then beckoned to her. Olivia Sullivan didn't understand, thinking the child wanted to tell her something. She leaned down closer to the little girl. "Sweetie, what do you want to tell big sister?" Instead, the younger cousin cupped her face, gave her a loud mwah kiss, and then tugged on Olivia Sullivan's skirt, yelling to Aunt Daisy, "Mommy, this big sister is so pretty. Can she be my sister? I don't want the other one anymore." Olivia Sullivan was stunned. Michael Thompson burst out laughing, and Emily Thompson looked furious. "You little brat. And after I spoil you so much." Emily Thompson slammed her hand on the table, ready to settle the score with the little girl. The whole table erupted in laughter. The little girl was shameless and insisted on sitting on Olivia Sullivan's lap, demanding that the pretty sister feed her instead of Emily Thompson. Olivia Sullivan also liked the cute little girl, often leaning down to speak softly to her while picking up food and feeding her. Michael Thompson leaned down and teased his younger cousin. "This sister is so pretty. How about you let big brother sit here for a while too?" The younger cousin looked at Michael Thompson, then at Olivia Sullivan, her little face wrinkling in indecision. But she had always been closest to Michael, so she finally scooted her little bottom over, freeing up one leg. "Okay, Michael, you can sit here." Olivia Sullivan blushed and smacked Michael Thompson lightly. "Don't say such improper things to a child." Robert Thompson noticed this interaction between her and Michael Thompson. But Robert Thompson just smiled, sipping his glass of bourbon, and didn't give it much thought. Unlike Margaret Thompson, he generally didn't meddle in his son's affairs. It wasn't that he didn't care, but he trusted his son to handle things himself. As long as he didn't become a grandfather within the next 2 years, it was fine. After lunch, Olivia Sullivan had intended to say goodbye and leave, but Margaret Thompson insisted she stay for dinner, and unable to refuse, Olivia reluctantly agreed. Her staying delighted the younger cousin the most, even more than Michael Thompson. The little girl really adored this pretty older sister, sticking to her side wherever she went. Olivia Sullivan liked children too, so she played with her. Michael Thompson asked her, "I'm going to my dad's shop this afternoon. Want to come along and look around?" Olivia Sullivan quickly nodded. After all, it was her first time at the Thompsons' house. If Michael Thompson wasn't around, being left alone with his family would be very awkward for her. So, later that afternoon, once the meal was over, Michael Thompson left the house with Olivia Sullivan and his younger cousin. Leaving the house, the three of them strolled along the banks of the Green River. The younger cousin held Olivia Sullivan's hand with one hand and Michael Thompson's with the other. From a distance, they looked like a family of 3 out for a stroll after dinner. Michael Thompson felt a bit awkward. "Margaret's just like that, really warm. If you have something to do this afternoon, it's okay to leave. I can tell her when I get back." Olivia Sullivan feigned annoyance. "What? You don't even want to spare me one meal?" She was starting to relax now. After all, she'd already eaten at Michael's house and met everyone she needed to meet, so she wasn't nearly as nervous and anxious as when she first arrived. Besides, she liked the atmosphere of the Thompson home and didn't mind staying for dinner. Michael Thompson laughed. "How could that be? I couldn't ask for you to stay more. If we didn't have any food, I'd even stew Buddy to serve you." Olivia Sullivan, a dog lover, was about to protest indignantly when she heard the younger cousin cheer, "Michael, I want to eat." Olivia Sullivan quickly crouched down and said seriously, "Doggies are people's best friends. We can't eat them." The younger cousin sucked her finger, tilted her little head, her face wrinkled in confusion, and asked innocently, "Aren't little piggies humans good friends?" What about little chickens? Well, and little bunnies and snakes. Your family eats snakes? Michael Thompson watched Olivia Sullivan crouching in front of his cousin, looking troubled, and thought their mental ages seemed about the same. Two kids, looking quite adorable. He crouched down and gently tapped his cousin's nose. Some little animals are raised to be eaten, and some are kept as pets. They're different. The younger cousin stared with wide, curious eyes and asked in a childish voice, "Why, Michael?" Because people are both rational and emotional. Rationally speaking, humans are part of nature, and the food chain, survival of the fittest, is nature's cycle. But people are also emotional creatures. We have feelings. Never mind little animals. People can even get attached to inanimate objects after a long time. Michael Thompson explained earnestly, while his younger cousin sucked her finger, head tilted, clearly not understanding. Olivia Sullivan couldn't help but say, "She's too young to understand all that." Whether she understands is one thing, but she still needs to be told the right principles. You can't just make up lies to fool kids just because they're young. Michael Thompson wasn't joking. He sounded serious. "When I was little, Margaret tricked me into believing eating chicken wings would let me fly. I totally believed her. When I got older and realized she'd lied, I was really upset. I hid under the covers that night and cried my eyes out." Olivia Sullivan burst out laughing. It took her a moment to stop, wiping tears from her eyes as she smiled. "I get the feeling you'll be a great dad someday." As soon as the words left her mouth, she froze. She stole a glance at Michael Thompson, but he was smiling and wiping his cousin's nose, seemingly oblivious. Olivia Sullivan covered her flushing cheeks and looked down. Her dangling hand brushed against someone, and she snatched it back abruptly. She thought Michael Thompson had tried to sneakily hold her hand, but when she turned, she saw his younger cousin looking up at her, mouth open, eyes welling up with tears. "Wah, Michael, does the pretty lady not like me anymore? That's why she won't hold my hand." I'll hold it. Olivia Sullivan quickly comforted the child, taking her hand again and teasing her for a while until her tears turned into laughter. Michael Thompson didn't intervene, just watched from the side. Once Olivia had comforted the little girl and taken her hand again, the three of them continued walking. Only then did he say softly, "You'll be a great mom someday, too." By the green river, a gentle breeze blew, sending ripples across the water surface. On the willow-lined bank, branches swayed lightly, and the breeze lifted a strand of the girl's hair by her ear. She reached up and tucked it gently behind her ear, revealing a flushed cheek. She had heard him. Report cards had come out yesterday, so technically, today was the first day of winter break. Michael Thompson had originally promised his father, Robert Thompson, that he would start formally learning stone carving as soon as the break began. But it was late January now, freezing cold, and Michael couldn't possibly drag Olivia Sullivan up the mountain. Miss Olivia had come dressed in a delicate dress and little leather boots, the thick-soled kind chosen deliberately to make her look taller. Getting them dirty climbing the mountain would be one thing, but slipping and falling splat into a muddy field would be truly pitiful. Besides, Olivia Sullivan was from Green Valley herself. None of this scenery would be new to her. So, Michael Thompson was taking her to Sculpture Town instead. As mentioned before, because Pine Creek Town had pyrophyllite mines, over time, many people had taken up the stone carving trade. On the east side of town, a place like a business association had been built, filled with rows of shops. Apart from one small convenience store selling drinks, every single shop was related to the stone carving industry. Robert Thompson's shop and workshop were also located here. But Michael Thompson hadn't come looking for his dad this time. He hadn't brought Olivia Sullivan here just to sightsee, either. The three of them reached the entrance to Sculpture Town, where a few kids were playing with cards on the ground. Of course, these weren't playing cards, but rather stiff cardboard discs with cartoon characters printed on them. They placed them face up on the ground, then slapped their palms down nearby to see who could flip the most cards face down. Michael Thompson used to love playing that as a kid, dragging Jake Wilson and other kids to the alley behind the elementary school. He'd come home every time with his palms red and swollen, making Margaret Thompson suspect he'd been mischievous at school and gotten paddled by the teacher. As soon as the younger cousin saw the kids squatting near the entrance, she happily let go of both their hands and ran over shouting, eager to join their game. Olivia Sullivan was initially worried and wanted to go pull her back, but Michael stopped her. "It's fine," Michael said with a grin. "They're all neighborhood kids. Some are even her classmates. Let her play with them. Let's go look around, just the two of us. Weren't you always curious about where your investment went? Come on, I'll show you something eye-opening." Although Olivia Sullivan always used investing as an excuse to see Michael Thompson every day at school, and he always playfully called her Boss Sullivan, she didn't actually care what he did with the supposed investment money he took from her. $100,000 wasn't exactly pocket change for her. She was still a student, after all, and even wealthy parents wouldn't give her that kind of allowance. Then again, being a student meant she didn't have many expenses either. If Michael Thompson needed the money, he could just have it. Besides, it didn't really matter in the long run. And considering he'd saved her grandfather, even $100,000 wasn't too much to consider as a reward. But now that Michael Thompson offered to show her where the investment had gone, Olivia Sullivan was intrigued. She tried to listen in on his thoughts, but it seemed like his mind was blank. She couldn't hear anything. Michael Thompson was, in fact, thinking, but Olivia Sullivan couldn't hear his thoughts whenever they related to his system. Olivia Sullivan looked worriedly towards Michael's younger cousin near the entrance. Will she be okay? She'll be fine. My Uncle Ben Thompson's shop is right over there, Michael Thompson said, pointing to a storefront near the entrance. I'll just pop over and let him know. He can keep an eye on her. My classmate and I are going to walk around. He walked over and called out to Uncle Ben Thompson, who was busy inside. Uncle Ben, I brought Ko. She's playing out front with the other kids. Can you watch her for a bit? My classmate and I are going to walk around. Having done that, he came back, smiling at Olivia Sullivan. Let's go. Oh, okay. Olivia Sullivan gave his cousin another look, but ultimately nodded and went with him. Sculpture Town occupied a triangular area bordered by 3 roads. Across the road, running alongside the Green River, stood a solitary, newer building constructed in a traditional style. Though built with modern concrete, its exterior featured wood paneling, and its roof culminated in a pagoda-like spire. Square, with tiled eaves on all 4 sides, it resembled a large pavilion. Known as the Treasure Tower, it occupied a substantial plot of land, covering several acres. The guild had built it, and the inside resembled a small, 3-story mall. Each floor housed several vendors, most of whom dealt in stones. Unlike the shops within Sculpture Town proper, which primarily sold finished carvings, the businesses here focused on raw, uncut stones. Michael Thompson and Olivia Sullivan stepped inside the Treasure Tower. The ground floor lobby was spacious, dominated by a red-carpeted stage at the center, faced by dozens of neatly arranged chairs. Noticing Olivia Sullivan gazing curiously at the setup, Michael explained with a smile, "This is where they hold auctions for raw stones. Material from Springfield, or sometimes from the Northeast or Myanmar, gets auctioned off here. Local stones usually don't make it to auction, though. Buyers contact the mines directly, load up their pickups, and drive off without giving the guild a chance to take a commission." He elaborated, "The local mines are all run by local families. In a small town like this, everyone knows everyone. It makes negotiating prices easier, and dealing directly saves them the guild's fee. But with Christmas approaching, there aren't any auctions scheduled, so the hall is empty," he finished. Olivia Sullivan nodded, though she didn't seem to fully grasp it all. Michael Thompson led her up to the 2nd floor and into one of the shops. The owner was occupied in the back room. Michael glanced in and saw him waxing stones. Not wanting to disturb him, Michael started browsing. The shop specialized in Springfield chicken bloodstone. Display cases held cut and polished stones, their vivid red surfaces facing outward, creating a pleasingly vibrant display. Several large, uncut rough stones were also scattered casually on the floor. Michael crouched down to examine these. They were unpolished, their surfaces as coarse and unremarkable as any rock you'd find on the side of the road. Some, however, exhibited a blood seam, a thin red line exposed during mining. This was a strong indicator of value within. A single cut along the seam would reveal the quality and spread of the prized red color. Appraise, he thought, focusing on the pile of rough stones. A faint light, invisible to others, flickered in his eyes. Raw chicken bloodstone. Weight, 4 pounds. Origin, Springfield. Height, blood color. Coverage, quality, 30 raw chicken bloodstone. Weight, 9 pounds. Detailed data for each stone materialized in his vision. After scanning the pile for a short while, however, Michael Thompson's eyes began to ache intensely. He pushed through the discomfort to assess all the stones, then quickly shut his eyes, pressing his thumb and forefinger against the corners as tears streamed uncontrollably down his face. Olivia Sullivan had been admiring the finished chicken bloodstones on the shelves. When she saw Michael Thompson suddenly tearing up while examining the rough stones on the floor, she hurried over to help him stand. "What's wrong?" she asked with concern, steadying him. Wiping his eyes, Michael mumbled, "It's nothing. Just remembered something sad." Olivia Sullivan was confused. Sad? She hadn't picked up on any sad thoughts from him at all. Just as they were speaking, the shop owner emerged from his back workshop. Seeing customers, he approached, still in his work clothes. "Find anything interesting, folks?" Still rubbing his eyes, Michael Thompson nudged one of the rough stones near his feet. "How much for this one?" It was the highest quality stone in the entire pile, rated 86. The owner glanced down. $250,000. Olivia Sullivan gasped. That much? She knew nothing about stones, but that price for a rough rock seemed utterly absurd. It wasn't like it was jade, but she was mistaken. Years ago, chicken bloodstone hadn't been worth much, but since the turn of the millennium, prices had skyrocketed. A truly high-quality piece could easily rival jade in value. Still, that price. Michael Thompson frowned. He'd initially suspected the owner was trying to rip off a couple of kids. But examining the stone more closely, he saw that wasn't entirely the case. The stone clearly showed a blood seam, and furthermore, someone had cut a small window into it along the seam to preview the color within. This sampling revealed a glimpse of its quality. The remaining gamble lay in the extent of the valuable red coloration inside. So, while high, the price wasn't based on nothing. Of course, there was still significant room for negotiation. That was the nature of the business. Ask for the sky, then haggle your way down. Just then, the shop owner's eyes lit up in recognition. "Say, aren't you Ben Thompson's boy? My goodness, look how tall you've gotten." That was the trouble with a small place like this. Everyone knew everyone, especially within the same trade. If Michael Thompson dropped tens of thousands on a rock here, his father, Robert Thompson, would hear about it before supper time. That would inevitably lead to a family interrogation about the source of the funds. Michael Thompson had anticipated this. Today, young Miss Olivia Sullivan was his shield. The shop owner was a man in his 40s. He recognized Michael Thompson, though Michael didn't recognize him. The owner grinned. Well, since when does Ben Thompson need supplies for my shop? Last time I went to Springfield, I went with him. Business booming, so much you need to borrow some inventory from me? Why are you here by yourself? Where's your dad?" The owner was a bit of chatterbox, but friendly enough. He poured 2 cups of hot water, added some tea leaves, and brought them over. Michael Thompson replied politely, "Sir, we're not actually here for inventory. My classmate came over to hang out today, and she was just curious about this kind of stuff, so I brought her to have a look around. Please don't worry about us. Go on with your work. Want me to tell you a bit about them?" No, it's okay. You're busy." Michael didn't bring up doing business. He had his eye on one particular stone in the shop, but he knew the price was out of reach. Even if the asking price of $250,000 was inflated, there was no way it would drop below $100,000. And right now, he only had a little over $80,000 on him. Not enough. After leading Olivia Sullivan on a quick browse through the shop, Michael Thompson headed out. Olivia didn't know what Michael was up to, but it was her first time seeing these kinds of stone carvings, and she found them quite interesting, not boring at all. Plus, this was the first time she'd been out alone with Michael. Just the two of them, which made her feel different. Could this count as our first official date? Olivia decided that when she got home, she would jot down today's date in her little notebook. She couldn't possibly forget this anniversary later. Michael Thompson, however, wasn't thinking along those lines at all. His mind was preoccupied with practical matters. He led Olivia Sullivan from one shop to the next, just browsing around. After a while, he didn't have much of an impression of anything, except for one thing. His eyes hurt. They were as red as a rabbit's, shot through with blood vessels, and tears streamed down his cheeks whenever he blinked. The appraisal skill gifted by the system seemed to have no limits, but in reality, the restrictions were significant. It was incredibly taxing on the eyes. It seemed this unconventional way of making money wasn't so easy after all. Doing it once in a while might be okay, but relying on it solely for income probably wouldn't work. Michael Thompson's obvious discomfort and teary eyes genuinely startled Olivia Sullivan. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Michael mumbled, unable to explain the real reason. "Just feels like I got some grit in my eye or something." Olivia Sullivan pulled him over to a rest area and gently pushed him down onto a chair. "Sit here, wait for me a second, okay?" Michael had no idea what she planned to do. He watched her duck into a nearby shop, exchange a few words with the person inside, and emerge holding a paper cup filled with water. She crouched down in front of Michael Thompson and urged, "Quick, close your eyes." Michael obediently shut them. She dipped a finger into the water, then gently raised her hand to trace along the edge of his closed eyelid. The tip of her slender index finger felt warm and soft, her movements slow, gentle, and careful as she wiped. After a moment, she gently pulled his eyelid open slightly, leaned in close, face to face, and blew softly across his eye. Michael felt a puff of fragrant air and caught a pleasant, milky scent coming from Olivia Sullivan, so faint he could only smell it this close. "Did that get it out?" she asked softly. "Yeah." He rubbed his eye, and when he opened it, he found Olivia Sullivan's face just inches away. Her delicate features were so close, he could almost feel her breath on his skin. Both of them froze, staring at each other, face to face for several seconds. Michael's gaze lingered on her faintly flushed cheeks. How could she be so cute? He thought. Like a big apple. Makes you just want to take a bite. The instant that thought surfaced, Olivia reacted as if she'd received an electric shock. She scrambled back several steps, stopping only then, covering her flushed face and watching Michael warily, as if bracing for a surprise attack. "Yep." Olivia Sullivan started to say something, but the words died on her lips. Instead, her voice softened as she asked quietly, "Is your eye feeling better?" "Huh? Oh yeah. Much better," Michael replied. His eye was still a little sore, but the brief rest had helped considerably. He stood up. "Let's keep looking." Another 2 hours passed as they wandered. After careful searching, Michael Thompson finally picked out a stone. It was another piece of raw agate, or not particularly large, weighing just over 3 G. Initially, the shop owner had been reluctant to sell it to them, seeing they were just a couple of high school students. Even raw stones like this weren't cheap. How could students afford it? But Michael produced cash, ready to pay in full on the spot, with no haggling over payment terms, so the owner agreed to the sale. The asking price for the raw stone was $120,000, but the final transaction price was $80,000. I just want to show how much padding was in these prices. After all, there's no exact value for collectibles like this. If a piece catches someone's eye, they might be willing to pay a fortune. That's why sellers always quoted inflated prices, while savvy buyers haggled relentlessly. Offer too high, and they'd act all reluctant, making it seem like you were getting a steal. Offer too low, and they wouldn't even bother talking to you. Negotiation was off the table. Only when you pushed the price down close to their actual bottom line would they start yelling, "No way at that price." Then they'd launch into a spiel about the item's merits and how your offer was practically an insult. That's when you knew you were getting close. Once Michael Thompson had bought the stone, he carried it and headed out. Olivia Sullivan, who had looked like she wanted to say something back when he was making the purchase, had kept quiet and simply followed him. Michael led her up to the 3rd floor. As soon as they reached the 3rd floor, they saw it was crowded. People filled the seating area, and when they spotted Michael Thompson coming up carrying a rough stone, quite a few drifted over curiously. Michael paid them no mind and walked straight past, deeper into the floor. As they went further in, the screeching whine of cutting machines filled the air. There were several machines inside. A few were currently operating, while one stood idle. A middle-aged man in a leatherwork apron was leaning against the side, smoking a cigarette and chatting loudly with someone nearby. Michael Thompson walked over and shouted, "Master, sorry to bother you." He had to shout. The noise from the machines was deafening. Even standing face to face, you had to raise your voice considerably to be heard. The middle-aged man glanced at Michael Thompson, tossed his cigarette but onto the floor, and stubbed it out with the toe of his boot. He took the stone from Michael, turned it over and over, inspecting it carefully. Then, he reached up, pulled a marking pencil from behind his ear, and drew a line across the stone. "Boss, you want it cut like this?" he yelled, gesturing repeatedly on the stone as he spoke. Michael glanced at the line and nodded. "Yes, start with that cut." The craftsman gave an okay gesture and carried the stone over to the cutting machine. The machine whirred to life. The sharp, spinning circular blade bit into the stone, following the marked line deep into its core. A moment later, a slice fell away. By this time, a considerable crowd had gathered to watch. When the craftsman brought out the cut stone, revealing the newly exposed surface, a collective gasp went through the onlookers. "Wow, that cut definitely paid off. This color is gorgeous, so clear and vibrant. That one cut just added tens of thousands to its value." People around murmured, though some lamented, "It's just a shame there isn't more color." And it was true. The agate stone Michael Thompson had cut revealed excellent quality color, but the coverage was sparse, just a few floating red spots. Plus, the stone itself wasn't large. There was profit to be made, but not a huge amount. But hearing these comments, Michael Thompson simply smiled faintly. He walked up, took the stone back from the cutter, borrowed a marker, and drew another line on the stone. "Sorry to trouble you, but let's make one more cut." His words caused a stir among the onlookers. "Whoa, this kid's got guts. If this next cut doesn't hit anything, he'll lose the little color he has. The stone will be worthless." Young people sure are bold. Most of the onlookers were experienced in the trade and could see Michael Thompson was aiming to cut deeper, gambling there was more blood inside. This particular rough agate stone had shown no external bloodlines, making this cut a pure gamble. Even if he won, it didn't guarantee finding good color, and if he lost, it would be nothing more than a worthless rock, maybe good for building. The cutter hesitated slightly, but Michael Thompson waved his hand dismissively. It's fine. Cut it. Okay, boss, but just so we're clear whether it turns out good or bad, it's not my fault, all right? Don't stiff me on the payment. The cutter took the stone, making sure to add the warning. Michael Thompson laughed. Forget the payment. I might even give you a bonus if it goes well. The cutter had no choice but to take the stone back to the saw, cutting along the line Michael Thompson had drawn. The saw blade was sharp. Cutting through the stone took only a few minutes. When the cutter held up the newly cut stone, revealing the fresh surface, the onlookers suddenly fell silent. Only the screeching sounds of nearby cutting machines filled the air. There, on the stone's cut face, was a brilliant crystalline red, a beautiful spread of floating red. Young man, are you taking the stone home to work on yourself, or are you planning to sell it? As soon as Michael Thompson's stone was revealed, several people crowded around, asking for a price. Quite a few were interested. On the third floor of the treasure pavilion, people were always watching, waiting for someone to cut a good stone so they could buy it firsthand at a relatively good price. Michael Thompson's father and uncles were also in this business and gambled on stones themselves. But the Thompson family were primarily carvers. They had their own cutting machines in their workshop and typically carved the stones themselves before selling. However, some people didn't know how to carve. They were purely involved in stone gambling, much like those who gambled on jade. They sold the stones immediately after cutting. The people waiting on the third floor specifically made their living dealing with such individuals. The former group wouldn't lose too badly, even if the stone wasn't great, as their craftsmanship still held value. But for the latter group, it truly was riches or rags with a single cut. Michael Thompson didn't intend to carve it himself. He was still learning basic engraving. Carving a piece of material this good would take him at least 5 or 6 more years of practice. So, he planned to sell it directly. Quite a few people were interested in the stone he'd cut. The highest bid reached $380,000, but Michael Thompson ultimately chose another buyer offering $300,000, a stone merchant from the Northeast. Although it was $80,000 less, this merchant could pay immediately. There was a Bank of America branch ATM right downstairs in the first floor lobby, and they could transfer the funds on the spot. The bidder offering $380,000 wanted to pay a deposit first and settle the balance in 2 months. Michael Thompson knew what he was up to, likely trying to find his own buyer before paying up, so he didn't bother dealing with him. The man from the Northeast was straightforward. After taking the stone from Michael Thompson, he immediately led him downstairs to the first floor to make the transfer. Looking at the $300,000 balance displayed on the ATM screen, Michael Thompson checked the number of zeros and couldn't help but feel amazed. He had made $220,000 in a single afternoon. The money had come rather easily. What's your car number? Michael Thompson turned and asked Olivia Sullivan beside him. Ever since they came up to the third floor, she had become quiet, seemingly lost in thought. She only spoke when Michael asked, "What for?" "To split the money. Didn't we say it was an investment?" Michael Thompson was a bit puzzled. He could tell Olivia Sullivan didn't seem very happy. Olivia Sullivan sniffed, wrinkling her nose. "I don't want it. And you're not allowed to do this anymore." With a troubled expression, she said, "This. Isn't it just like gambling?" Michael Thompson was momentarily stunned, unsure how to explain for a long moment. It definitely wasn't the same as illegal gambling. One was illegal, the other wasn't. Stone gambling involved a lot of experience and knowledge. It wasn't something you could get into based purely on luck. If Michael Thompson hadn't been able to cheat, his own judgment wouldn't have been good enough for this business either. But had the pretty girl been unhappy this whole time just because of this? Michael Thompson guessed correctly. Olivia Sullivan really was upset precisely because of this. She was an outsider, true, but hearing people talk about riches or rags with a single cut made her feel it was too similar to gambling. She detested it. When she was little, before her great-uncle, Arthur Sullivan's brother, passed away, she had met him once. The image of the old man who had lost a hand due to gambling in his youth had left a deep shadow on her. Furthermore, Arthur Sullivan had always taught her to stay away from such things since she was a child, and she had taken his words to heart. Then there was the incident with her own brother, desperate after losing money, cornering her at the school plaza demanding cash. Olivia Sullivan despised gambling more than anything. Michael Thompson had initially wanted to explain the differences, but seeing Olivia Sullivan's sad and earnest expression The words died on his lips. Instead, he said, "Okay, I'll listen to you." What was the point of explaining? If the pretty girl didn't want him to do it, then he wouldn't. Sometimes explanations were useless. Spoiling her and going along with her was the way to go. In the future, when they knew each other longer, she might understand it wasn't quite like that. They could talk about it then. Olivia Sullivan's heart warmed. She had expected an argument with Michael Thompson, but hadn't thought he'd be so agreeable. Thinking this, she couldn't help but soften her stance slightly. Anyway, you just can't get addicted to this stuff. Occasionally, maybe. Just occasionally. All right, forget occasionally. I wasn't planning on making a fortune this way anyway. It's hard on the eyes, Michael Thompson joked, then urged her, Okay, just give me your card number so we can split the loot. What do you mean, split the loot? That sounds awful, Olivia Sullivan muttered, displeased. But doing a quick mental calculation, she realized that if Michael Thompson gave her this money, it would not only cover what she had given him, but leave a considerable amount extra. If that happened, would Michael Thompson still have a reason to see her? The thought filled Olivia Sullivan with an indescribable feeling. She had been using the money situation as a pretext to see Michael Thompson, a thin veil for her real reasons. But if the excuse disappeared, even if Michael Thompson still wanted to interact with her, she wouldn't have a reason to seek him out. At this realization, her expression soured, her brow furrowed. Already told you, I don't want it. With that, she turned and walked away without giving Michael Thompson a chance to respond. Michael Thompson watched her walk off to the side, stunned for a moment. He chuckled softly to himself. Why is she getting mad when I'm trying to give her money? He shook his head helplessly, retrieved his bank card from the ATM, and quickly went after Olivia Sullivan.